Welcome, everybody, to the Enlightened Entrepreneur Podcast, and thank you for joining us here to be your own boss, create livelihoods that matter, and make the world an even better place. I'm your host, Julie Sampson, director of the Scheinfeld Center. So let's get to it. 2022 is dubbed the Year of the Worker with the Great Resignation and Reshuffle in response to the pandemic. Beyond hybrid and remote teams, how can the workplace be redesigned to drive equity and be more rewarding and engaging for workers? Employee-owned companies may be part of the answer. In the second podcast of 5, we continue our exploration of the transformative impact of employee-owned businesses, especially as it relates to creating a culture of innovation that benefits workers, communities, and local economies, while simultaneously boosting innovation, business growth, productivity, and profitability. Joining us to break it down is Brad Hippert, an expert in banking with more than 30 years experience in the financial sector. He's currently the founding CEO of Equity Atlas, a 100% worker-owned mortgage company with the aim of transforming how home financing is managed. He focuses on innovative lending practices, market-driven program development, and unique ownership and compensation models, and he is committed to advancing green building techniques and sustainable living practices. Brad has held management positions at Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, Bank of America, and Security Pacific National Bank. Welcome, Brad, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So before we jump in, let's give our audience a quick definition of employee ownership. So we could say employee ownership is where a company's employees are full or part owners of a business. And there are different types of employee ownership. One type is the employee-owned trust, also called the EOT for short. It's a trust that holds some or all of the shares of a company for the purpose of providing financial benefit and governance rights to employees of the company. And if you'd like to take a deeper dive into that, in the description of this video, we have a link to a video that does just that. So Equity Atlas is an example of a company that formed an EOT in 2019. So with that context, Brad, could you share a bit about Equity Atlas and the mission of your company? And kind of as founding CEO, what was it that led you to that mission?
EOT actually wasn't our goal initially. Our goal was to create a company that offered shared responsibility, shared prosperity, not responsibility, and economic equality. We were looking for ways to strengthen the financial well-being of the 99%. And we basically worked 2 years researching this idea, this concept. And through that process, we realized that if we wanted to have a company that could make this happen, our best opportunity would be under the model of the worker ownership. All the research and everything told us that if you're looking for a great company to work with, a positive environment, looking for good compensation, and a mission-driven company, that the worker ownership model was going to give you the best opportunity to make that happen. Well, when we got ready to launch, when we were ready to launch the company, we hit this wall, which was unforeseen. There was the co-op model and the ESOP model, but both of them had inherent features within them which, in our eyes, prohibited us from launching the company. With the co-op model, everyone would have to be bonded and licensed because we're a finance company, which logistically is impossible. With the ESOP model, there is hard-coded into the language the right for the employees to vote. Once the ownership percentage hits 51%, they have the right to vote and sell the company. And we felt that if we were going to take this much time and energy and develop this company, we wanted this to actually continue on after we're gone, possibly not into perpetuity, but to continue on for ages and not be under that constant stress of being sold. So the ESOP model for us, although we like the model and we think it's great for certain types of companies, it didn't fit our needs. So at that point, we made it our mission to find or create a model that did work, which ended up being the EOT.
One of the things that you state on your website is that some companies will claim, hey, we're employee owned, but in reality, the worker experience of that can be different. So could you break that down a little for us?
There's a nonprofit out there called Certified EO, and certifiedeo.com. They certify employee ownership companies. We were the first company to be certified by them as employee owned. The importance here is that there are a lot of companies out there that maybe the company is owned 30%, maybe 20%, maybe 10% by employees, but they promote those companies as employee owned, when in fact, the employees own a minor share of the company. And we were really thankful that the EOT, the certified EO, actually came into fruition to actually help separate and give credence to those companies who are truly worker-owned. So over time, when you have to think about this, they were new, we were the first. They now have over 400 certified worker-owned companies that they list on their website. And it really helps to differentiate between who you're doing business with and whether or not they meet that criteria, or whether they're basically a smoke and mirror type of situation.
Does the EO company certify all different types of employee-owned businesses, not just the EOT?
Yes, co-ops, ESOPs, EOTs, yes.
Okay, great. That's a good resource. We'll link to that in down below in the video description. So what steps did you have to go through in order to develop your EOT? Because this was in 2019. I think at that time, this was still, well, the EOT is very long-standing in the UK. This was relatively new to the US, right? And so tell us about in 2019, what you had to go through and what the steps are in order to form the EOT.
There was a company in Vermont that had actually developed a similar model like the EOT, but nobody knew about them. So here we are, after 2 years of research, we're ready to launch the company, and we hit this wall. So we thought, oh, we'll just make some phone calls and we'll find a new governance model that will work. Well, that 1 month turned into 2, turned into 6, turned into a year, turned into 18 months. We did an 18-month in-depth deep dive to try and find an expert in this field. And I spoke with attorneys all over the U.S. I spoke to professors. I spoke to CEOs of companies. I read books. I spent hours at a local law library here in Portland. And there was absolutely, everybody talked about the need for this, but nobody had the solution. And in the end, after 18 months, we were running out of runway. We thought that we had bitten off more than we could chew, and that there was no solution. So we said, okay, we were going to commit to another 30 days of in-depth search. And in the end, we stumbled on this little NGO, non-government organization out of Brookline, Massachusetts, called IDA Group. And the way they spoke on their website, we thought to ourselves, they've been thinking about this. They've actually been thinking, they know something about this. And so we contacted them, and sure enough, Dr. Michael he was part of the organization as their lead attorney. And We shot them an email, they responded, and we spent the next 6 months working with them to develop the EOT.
Wow, that's quite a process. But now, so that was in 2019. Here we are, 2022.
Well, actually, it was 2017. That was 2017.
2017. Okay. And do you feel, from your experience, because you're very engaged in this area of employee ownership, is it easier to find the professionals who, have the expertise, to do the financial end of this, and also, attorneys that understand what needs to be done in order to form the EOT? Has that changed?
Everything is pretty well baked at this point. Yeah, Dr. Christopher Michael is considered the foremost expert in the U.S. There are several organizations out there that are assisting companies to transition to the EOT. The Purpose Foundation immediately comes to mind. Camille Cannon, who's the company's based in Berlin, and their U.S. representative, Camille Cannon, was instrumental in helping Organically Grown Company, which is based in Eugene, Oregon. They had 300 plus employees, and the employees only owned 17% of the company, but they wanted to own 100% of the company, so they had all these absentee shareholders. Well, she worked with them for 6 months and actually structured the transition to buy out all of the absentee shareholders. They are now 100%, and they financed that through RSF Social Fund out of San Francisco. The buyout was $10.2 million, which was RSF Social Fund's largest loan to date, and it really catapulted the industry forward. That single transition there to the EOT, or what they call a purpose trust. Yeah, it's morphing and taking on different names and different forms, and that's the beauty of the EOT, is that it's so malleable. You can tweak it to meet the needs of each company, and every company is a little bit different. Every company has different needs, so you can adjust it according to when the shares vest, how long before they vest, and the requirements of the vesting for the worker owners. All of that. In terms of the benefits, the profit sharing, the retirement benefits, all of that can be tweaked, really depending upon the needs and the goal of the owners of the organizations.
Well, it's so great that you and other companies were pioneers in getting this going here, and that everything continues to evolve. It seems like it's really starting to take hold, which really holds promise for changing the experience within the workplace, which is great. So maybe we could turn to that now. Equity Atlas, how many employees does your company have?
We're still a small organization, only 5. Yes, we're entering our next phase of growth, and we hope that growth trajectory just keeps on going. There was a lot of work. We really had to build the base of the company. In fact, to give an example, a lot of it's baked, but we're still hitting walls here and there. For example, right now we're in the process of becoming B Corp certified.
Yes.
And the B Corp people do not recognize the EOT as a worker-owned governance framework. So they're actually, there's pushback, and they're saying that we are not a worker-owned company. And so again, that education process, and that we've been working on this now for 6 months with them, and we're still not over the hurdle. And I think back about Wikipedia. We worked with Graham Nuttall, who's the foremost authority on the EOT in England. We worked with him for 3 months to list or have this information posted on Wikipedia. And not 3 months, 3 years we worked with him to post this information on Wikipedia. So we'd submit it and be rejected. We submitted, be rejected. It was like, no, this isn't right. So in the end, yeah, we did prevail. But it's been a lot of battles, a lot of uphill climbing, and we really see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we're confident now there are enough companies out there that are operating under the EOT that we feel that legislative-wise, in terms of the federal government and the way that we're licensed as a company, that we are A-OK, that we have crossed every T and dotted every I, and now we can position ourselves to grow.
Your Equity Atlas is such a great example. You know, we hear many examples of employee-owned trust companies, and a lot of times they're big, you know, hundreds of employees. So it's really great that you are an example of, hey, you can be a very small company in terms of the number of employees and still have this in place. And still the employees get to benefit from this. And I would think when a company is ready to grow, you know, to go through a growth initiative, that could be a good way to attract, you know, new workers into the positions that you open up. Can you talk about, with the employees that you have, like, what are the top benefits that they experience as directly as a result of you being the EOT?
I would say that first and foremost, they have a voice in how the company is run. And they can be as involved as they want or not. Now, you still have to have your hierarchy, and you can't have everybody making every decision because, of course, that's inefficient. But the key parts of the company where the important decisions are made, they have a voice in that. And the other driving, probably one of the things that we forget a lot about is that, like I mentioned earlier, the worker ownership, the number of shares that are held by different people varies within the company. So you can have one person own a lot of the shares and control the voice of the company, whereas with the EOT model that we established, it's one share, one vote. So everybody has a say. And I think that's really makes a difference in terms of how people look at that responsibility, how they perceive the company, and where and what's important to them. They can bring that into the mix. Secondly, probably sharing in the profits of the company. I know that having worked for two of the top 5 banks, the more money I made, the more money I made them, the less money I started making. And it was odd over time that it was going backwards instead of forwards. So it was like, no, this isn't right. This has got to change. We need to do something different here. And so as the company grows, as it does become more successful, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so it helps not only the community and the customers, but of course the employees. And so everybody benefits as that happens. And then I think the other thing is something that's really hard to measure or even identify, but we consider ourselves a learning organization. And so there's continuous personal and interpersonal development and growth, sharing best practices, looking for new best practices, looking for new ways to do things, and trying to be continuously innovative. And I always say that if you don't like to learn, this is not the place for you, because every week, even in our meetings, we are all learning something new. And that is not just helpful in terms of your job, but in terms, I think, of everywhere you touch, your family, your friends, your relatives, your parents, your kids. That impacts and actually helps everyone be more socially aware, sharper, make better decisions, and just really have a more fulfilling life. So these are things that we try to not only create within our work environment, but promote. And I think that's something you can't even put a value on, because I think that interpersonal and personal growth is so important that it is something that's often overlooked. In fact, it didn't exist in any company that I've ever worked for, and unfortunately, I worked for a few too many.
Yeah, well, we do hear from Gen Z, you know, that this is one of the things that they want from an employer, you know, that the employer is invested in their growth and development, you know, and that they're getting a wage that enables them, to be well in their lives and within their families, so these qualities that the EOT encourages within an organization are so important, increasingly important as we continue forward. And I was wondering, are there any types of skills that employees come in and maybe they need to work on the most in order to be effective in your company as an EOT? Anything or things that they come in with that make them, especially great at this, that kind of looking at the skill gaps that might be there. Do you see any patterns?
No patterns to date. The jobs do require very specific skill sets, and we try to match that job with the individual as best as we can. If the experience isn't there, the learning curve is rather high, and we don't mind that learning curve and bringing on people who don't have that experience, but there are certain base skill sets that you do need to have, and we do find that some people do not have them. I mean, basic math skills is essential. And we find sometimes that people don't have that, which is surprising.
As part of the employee experience, are they engaged in looking at the financials of the company and understanding, was this a good quarter, was it not, and kind of matching what your initiatives as a company with what's going on financially? Are they engaged that way?
Extremely engaged. We're completely transparent internally. Everybody knows how much we're making as a company. They know our debts, they know our challenges, they're aware of our growth, our plan of growth. They know where we are actually excelling, and we have certain advantages, core advantages over other organizations. So yes, all of that information is disseminated and discussed actually every week at our weekly meetings. It really, so it's that's why I'm saying you're learning every week, whether it's in your job or through the meetings that we hold. You're actually being educated on how a company like this operates, as well as what you can do to assist in improving the benefits to the customers and to themselves. Yeah. And it's quite a process.
Yes, that's such a different experience. A lot of our students, while they're, very much entrepreneurial, not all of them aspire to start their own business, but they can bring these entrepreneurial skills into the workplace. And it sounds like they would be a good fit for this type of employee-owned company because they have some business background. They can relate to, how actions and marketing, all the different operations can affect that bottom line, and they're problem solving types of individuals. So I think that entrepreneurial mindset is maybe a really key skill set. The skills and the mindset are really important for employees who are seeking this type of environment to work in, or to create this type of environment for their own employees.
We welcome that entrepreneurial spirit. There's no question. I think back at the other companies I worked for. As a manager, I knew what the P&L was. I knew where we were financially. I knew about the balance sheets, et cetera, but none of my staff did, because that was not incorporated into the job description. Here is just the opposite. We provide access to all of that data, all that information, and discuss it openly. Because why? Well, if you're going to be a part of an organization like this here, you really should have at least some base understanding of how it works, and why there are certain challenges over here, and what's going right over here, and why we do a lot of what we call debriefing. After transactions closed, we look at, okay, what went right, what went wrong, where can we improve, where did we fall down, where did we fail, and how do we make this next transaction even better? And for the first time in over 35 years that I've been in this industry, I'm actually seeing the benefits of that. And our closings are going, everything is actually moving through the system with a lot less resistance from outside forces that can actually shut down a transaction. And I've never experienced that before. So the proof is in the pudding there. It's working what we're doing, our tactic, our approach, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. So you talked about those benefits to your company. Are there any other benefits that you notice as a company, as a result of the EOT?
I think that one of the larger benefits is also for our customers, in addition to the employees. And all of that 4 years that we've worked on developing this company, we were able to do this all without any outside investment. Initially, I was looking for about $1.5 million cash infusion to get the company off the ground. And then we met a gentleman who was behind the scenes processing loans for the credit unions here locally. And he liked the concept and idea so much that when we hit the wall and we couldn't get licensed, he said, "Oh, I have a license sitting here in the drawer. Why don't you use that? And then once you figure it all out, you can just flip everything into the new company." And so he was a saving grace for us. And we were able to launch the company and actually start doing business, which allowed us to eliminate, and then it went from 1.5 million to, I think, 200,000 to 150 to 50, and then we realized we could do this all without any outside investment. Yeah, and that was quite a breakthrough. So the benefit of that, again, really, it can be put into dollars, but the biggest benefit is a lot of those profits that you normally see go to Wall Street, to the 1%, are now returned back to the consumer through lower fees and lower rates. And so you talk about shared prosperity. That's the goal of the company, to reduce the cost of financing, to reduce the cost of banking, to reduce those expenditures that really are all paper expenditures, so that we have more disposable income, so that we don't live, paycheck to paycheck. And if we can do our little part here, and maybe another company can do their little part over there, everybody starts winning.
That's great. Yeah, that actually relates to one of the questions that our audience had asked is, how does this fit into the big picture about creating more prosperity and more equity, in terms of wealth? So great, you answered that question without me even asking it. That's great. We're actually at the end of our time, if you can believe it, but maybe with our closing question, in our community, we have, entrepreneurs who are aspiring to start up businesses, and we have, established business owners that are looking for new ways of doing things, especially as a result of, the dynamics associated with the pandemic. Are there any, do you have a top tip that you would offer to people that would help them take the next step to exploring employee ownership?
I believe probably the most important part of this is to hire an expert to help you with the transition. I think that if you try and do it yourself, you're really you're going down the wrong pathway. It is somewhat complex, and you really need somebody that's going to come in there, assess your circumstances and situation, and then make recommendations to you. So if you think about that organically grown company and what Camille Cannon did there, that was a 6-month process, and there was an excessive analysis done and then recommendations made to make that happen. Eric Schmidt from Schmidt Futures, Eric and his wife, they started a company called Schmidt Futures. Eric used to be the CEO of Google. And within their curriculum, or within their initiative, they have this shared prosperity initiative. And they had a lady by the name of Zoe Schlag, who is an entrepreneur in residence there, and she got wind of what we were doing, and she actually wrote a mini book called Exiting to Employees Through Employee Ownership. And she has made that available to anybody and everybody, and we actually have it on our website, so you can download it. It's under the resources section. It's, like I said, a mini book, but it really goes deep into the process and the transition from a conventional company to a worker-owned, utilizing the EOT. So hopefully those two recommendations people will find helpful.
That's super. Thank you so much for those resources. Thank you for joining us. This has been super enlightening and also inspiring to know that forming an employee-owned business and EOT is open to all different types of companies. It's not just for the larger companies, so that the benefit can be distributed, throughout the business world. That's super inspiring, and thank you. And to our audience, thank you. And we hope that this podcast has inspired you to explore employee ownership, either as a startup or as an existing business, or even as an employee, where you place yourself well in a company that really has interest in you. What are your thoughts on employee-owned businesses? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to tune in next week when we'll continue our exploration on employee ownership. And we hope that you will like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find our community and join in as well. So thanks again, Brad, and thank you, everyone. See you next week.